Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I used to work at this small accounting firm right after college. It wasn't anything fancy, but it paid the bills and helped me start my family. I was always naturally thin, like people constantly asking if I eat thin. Back then, I could eat whatever I wanted without gaining an ounce. Life was pretty sweet that way. I worked there for about 6 years, alongside my boss's kids who were around my age. They weren't exactly friendly, but we got along well enough for co-workers. The boss's daughter especially had this way of making backhanded comments about my weight, always disguised as compliments. You know the type. She would always say how lucky I was that I could eat anything and stay skinny, or wish she had my metabolism, claiming she gained 5 pounds just by looking at a cookie. Then I had my first kid. My body changed, as bodies tend to do after pregnancy, and I gained about 20 pounds that stuck around no matter what I did. The comments at work shifted from fake envious to concerned. She would constantly ask if I was sure I was eating healthy, or try to push whatever new diet she'd heard about onto me. She even started leaving weight loss pamphlets on my desk when she thought I wasn't looking. I had my second kid 3 years later, and surprise, another 20 pounds joined the party. By this point, I'd learned to tune out the weight comments, but they were getting under my skin. Her comments got even more frequent, and she started bringing up my weight in client meetings, asking loudly if I needed a bigger chair or suggesting we order salads instead of the usual lunch spread. I finally decided to leave the firm for a better opportunity, better pay, better hours, and most importantly, better co-workers. Fast forward 6 months, and I'm at the park with my kids on a sunny Saturday. They're having the time of their lives on the swings while I'm just enjoying watching them play. The park backs up to this one-way street where my old boss lives with her kids, about 150 feet away. I've been avoiding this park specifically because I knew they lived there, but my kids had been begging to try the new playground equipment they'd installed. I'm pushing my youngest on the swing when I hear someone shouting from the direction of that house. It was my former boss's daughter, using that old nickname she knew I hated, Pickly Rickley. I looked up to see her waving frantically, so I waved back, trying to be polite. Then she shouted across the park, asking if I was having another kid, making sure everyone could hear her question. Her voice had that fake excitement that made my blood boil. This wasn't genuine interest. This was her trying to embarrass me in public, just like she used to do at work. But this time, I wasn't her co-worker anymore. I didn't have to play nice. I shouted back that no, I was just fat now. The playground went silent. Parents stopped mid-conversation, kids paused their playing, and even the birds seemed to stop chirping for a moment. The former co-worker's face turned bright red, and she practically ran back into her house. I could see her mom in the backyard, mouth open in shock, watering and frozen mid-pour. A few seconds later, I heard snickering from some of the other parents. One mom even gave me a thumbs up, and another came over to tell me she'd been watching that woman make rude comments to other parents for months. My kids didn't even notice the exchange. They were too busy having fun on the swings. Later that week, I heard my former co-worker had been complaining about how unprofessional I was. Apparently, she'd been telling everyone at her mom's firm about our encounter, expecting sympathy, but instead got told that maybe she shouldn't shout personal questions across a public park if she didn't want honest answers. One of her co-workers even started a running joke about shouting personal questions across the office. My old boss actually called me to apologize for her daughter's behavior. She also mentioned that this incident had made her realize how toxic her daughter's behavior had been at work, and she'd started requiring everyone at the firm to attend monthly sensitivity training sessions. A month later, I took my kids back to that park. The former co-worker was there with some friends, but this time she quickly gathered her things and left as soon as she saw me. The other parents at the playground actually cheered when she left. Apparently, my response had become something of a local legend, and her public commentary on other people's appearances had finally stopped. I've been a single dad for the past 3 years. My wife passed away during childbirth complications, leaving me to raise our daughter alone. It hasn't been easy, especially with my line of work, but I've managed to create a stable routine that works for both of us. My daughter just turned 4 last month, and despite everything, she's growing up to be a happy, energetic child who reminds me more of her mother every day. I'm often away on missions, so when I'm home, I make sure to spend quality time with my little girl. That particular day, we were at the local playground near our house. It's a spot we frequently visit when I'm not deployed, and my daughter absolutely loves the swing set there. The weather was perfect, sunny but not too hot, with a gentle breeze that made the leaves dance around the playground. While she was playing on the slide with some other kids, I sat on a nearby bench, keeping a watchful eye as always. Years of training had taught me to stay alert even in the most casual situations, and something about this day made my instincts sharp. That's when this woman, let's call her Karen, approached the playground with what looked like her own kid. From the moment she arrived, something felt off about her. She kept looking around nervously and checking her phone every few seconds. Her body language was tense, and she seemed more focused on the other children than her own. I noticed her watching my daughter a bit too intently, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe she was just making sure her kid wasn't getting into any trouble. But then she started inching closer to where my daughter was playing. Her movements were calculated, almost predatory, and I could see her constantly checking the positions of other parents around the playground. That's when she approached my daughter, calling out to her as if she was her mother. She pretended she had been looking everywhere for her, using that sickly sweet voice that made my skin crawl. My daughter, clearly confused and starting to get scared, told the woman she didn't know her. I could see her little hands gripping the edge of the slide, her whole body language showing how uncomfortable she was. I was already on my feet moving toward them when Karen grabbed my daughter's arm with enough force to make her wince. She tried to convince my daughter that they were late for a doctor's appointment, even claiming that her father had asked her to pick her up. The lie rolled off her tongue so easily that I knew this wasn't her first attempt at something like this. I immediately demanded that she step away from my daughter, my voice carrying the authority that comes from years of giving orders in high-pressure situations. Karen turned around, still holding on to my daughter's arm, and told me to mind my own business. Her face was a mask of practiced innocence as she insisted that this was her daughter and they were leaving, but I could see the panic starting to build in her eyes as she realized she was being confronted. I gave her one final warning to let go of my daughter, my tone making it clear that there would be consequences if she didn't comply. Instead of complying, this woman actually tried to run, dragging my screaming daughter with her. Big mistake. Huge. Maybe it was the adrenaline, or maybe she thought she could outrun me. She made it about 10 steps before I caught up, moving with a speed and precision that had been drilled into me through countless training sessions. One precise strike to her shoulder's nerve cluster, and she dropped like a sack of potatoes. The technique was clean, efficient, and exactly what we practiced for subduing targets without causing permanent damage. My daughter was safely in my arms before Karen even hit the ground, her small body trembling but otherwise unhurt. Other parents were already calling the police while Karen lay there, momentarily unconscious. When she came to a few seconds later, she started yelling about how she would press assault charges against me. Her face was red with rage and embarrassment as she struggled to get up, her legs still wobbly from the takedown. Police arrived quickly, and that's when things got really interesting. One of the officers immediately recognized me and expressed surprise at seeing me back from deployment. We had worked together on several joint operations between local law enforcement and my unit. Karen's face went from angry to confused as the officer explained to his partner who I was. See, what this wannabe kidnapper didn't know was that she had just tried to snatch the daughter of a special operations officer specialized in close-quarters combat and hostage rescue. Karen started screaming about how I was lying and demanded that I be arrested, but her voice had lost its earlier confidence. The officer just smiled and pulled out his handcuffs, the metal catching the sunlight. He told her that he had witnessed her trying to kidnap the child of one of their most decorated special operations officers and that she was under arrest. The color drained from her face as she realized just how badly she had miscalculated. Her whole demeanor changed from aggressive to defeated in seconds. They took her away in the patrol car, and my daughter and I went home for ice cream. She was a bit shaken but bounced back quickly. Kids are resilient that way. We spent the rest of the afternoon watching her favorite cartoons, and by evening she was back to her usual cheerful self. Now whenever we go to the playground, she tells everyone about how her daddy made the bad lady take a nap. I guess those years of specialized training came in handy in a way I never expected. Karen got 15 years without parole. During the trial, it came out that she had been selling the children she kidnapped to wealthy couples overseas, charging hundreds of thousands of dollars per child. The judge wasn't too impressed with her sob story about being confused and thinking it was her child. The prosecutor presented evidence of her elaborate planning and the international trafficking ring she was part of. She's now helping the FBI track down other members of her trafficking ring in exchange for a slightly reduced sentence, but she won't be seeing the outside of a prison for a very long time. I never planned to stay in tech support for long. With my computer science degree and 3 years of freelance development under my belt, I was hoping to land a software engineering position, but the recession hit hard, and I had bills to pay. When I saw the opening for an information technology support specialist at a mid-sized marketing firm, I figured it would be a temporary stepping stone. The job itself wasn't bad at first. My team handled everything from printer issues to server maintenance, and I actually enjoyed the variety. Plus, my programming background meant I could automate some of our routine tasks, making everyone's life easier. The pay was decent, and my colleagues were great. Then everything changed when our department got a new manager. From day one, he made it clear that he didn't trust any of us. He'd hover over our shoulders, questioning every decision we made. During our first team meeting, he spent 20 minutes lecturing us about accountability and measurable metrics. When I pointed out that we already had a ticketing system tracking all our support requests and resolutions, he dismissed my concern. He questioned how he could know what we were doing between tickets or about informal requests that came through email or in person. I tried explaining that we already logged those in the system if they took significant time, but he wasn't satisfied. He demanded to know who decided what counted as significant and insisted we needed something more comprehensive. That's when he dropped the bomb about his new logging system. Every single task had to be documented, no matter how small. He even created a spreadsheet template for us to use. He made it clear this wasn't negotiable, stating he needed to know exactly what everyone was doing at all times. According to him, if it wasn't logged, it didn't happen. One of my co-workers tried to reason with him, explaining that this would slow us down considerably since we were already handling a full workload. The manager just told us we needed to manage our time better and announced the system would start Monday. That weekend, I stewed over the situation. Then I had an idea. If he wanted detailed logs, I'd give him exactly what he asked for. Monday morning, I started my malicious compliance campaign. Every single action got its own detailed entry, logged into computer, opened email client, reviewed new emails, contemplated response to urgent printer issue email, drafted response to printer issue, revised response for clarity, sent email response, created log entry about email response. By the end of the first week, my log was over 40 pages long. The manager's inbox was flooded with log entries, and he was spending more time reviewing them than actually managing. When he complained that this was excessive and said he didn't need to know every time we checked email, I innocently asked if he was suggesting we should skip some tasks. When he said no but told us to use common sense, I pressed him for specific guidelines about what constituted a loggable task, explaining that I wanted to ensure full compliance with the policy. He couldn't give a straight answer, and that's when things got interesting. While maintaining my detailed logs, I was also quietly working on something else. I used my programming skills to create a simple browser extension that could automatically track our activities and generate reports. It was basically doing what the manager wanted, but without the manual overhead. After 3 weeks of overwhelming logs from me and several other team members who followed my lead, the manager called another meeting. He admitted the logging system wasn't working as intended and said we needed to scale it back. That's when I spoke up about my solution. I demonstrated my tracking tool. It was streamlined, efficient, and provided even better insights than his manual logging system. It required zero extra effort from the team. When he demanded to know when I had time to build this, I sweetly told him that all the development time was logged in last week's reports, pages 23 through 47. Word about the tool spread to other departments and eventually reached the director of operations. She called me in for a meeting and I explained how the tool could be expanded to track productivity across different teams while actually saving time. 2 months later, I was promoted to software development lead for a new internal tools team. He was reassigned to a different department, and he was no longer with the company. It started with what I thought was just a regular cold during winter break. My parents and I didn't think much of it at first. Some coughing, congestion, the usual stuff. But when school started back up in January, things got way worse. By the time I returned to 8th grade, this cold had evolved into something nightmarish. Every time I tried to do anything more strenuous than walking, I'd break into these violent coughing fits that would leave me gasping for air. The worst part was the amount of phlegm I'd cough up. It was so much that I'd literally throw up. My parents took me to several doctors who ran various tests. They eventually put me on 3 different types of inhalers, but even those barely helped. The doctors couldn't figure out exactly what was wrong, but they advised me to avoid any strenuous physical activity until the condition improved. Then came that infamous day in physical education class. Our teacher, who was known for being strict about participation, announced we'd be doing the dreaded mile run. Before class started, I approached her desk to explain my situation. I told her I needed to discuss the mile run with her. When she asked what about it, I explained that I had been really sick with a chest infection and couldn't run without having severe coughing attacks. She immediately asked if I had a doctor's note. When I said no, I tried to emphasize how sick I was and that I could barely walk fast without coughing. She stated that without a note, I couldn't be excused and would have to run, just trying my best. When I tried to protest further, she shut me down, insisting everyone had to run that day. I looked around helplessly, seeing my classmates already lining up at the starting line. Some of them knew about my condition and gave me sympathetic looks. I slowly made my way to the back of the line, dreading what was about to happen. The teacher blew her whistle, and everyone started running. I took literally 1 running step forward, and exactly what I warned her about happened. I erupted into a violent coughing fit right there on the track, 3 feet away from where she was standing. My chest felt like it was being ripped apart, and I couldn't catch my breath between coughs. Then came the phlegm. A lot of it. Right there on the grass in front of everyone. Some of my classmates stopped running to see if I was okay, but the teacher shooed them away to continue their run. The school nurse, who happened to be walking by the field, saw what was happening and rushed over. She had been treating me for weeks and knew about my condition. She demanded to know why I was running. When the teacher explained I didn't have a doctor's note to sit out, the nurse was incredulous. She reminded the teacher that I had been visiting her office almost daily and that she had personally spoken to my doctors. The nurse helped me up and confronted the teacher angrily. She explained how I had been seriously ill for months and that she had personally told all teachers about my condition through email. She demanded to know if the teacher had read any of her emails. The teacher's face turned red as several other students gathered around, watching the scene unfold. She stammered that she must have missed those emails. The nurse then told her that this would be reported to the principal, and she helped me to her office. The next day I had a different physical education teacher. Apparently the original teacher had been reported not just for my incident, but for several other cases where she'd ignored students' medical conditions. She was moved to teaching health classes instead, where she couldn't force sick kids to run anymore. And yes, I finally got better after about 3 more months of treatment. But I never forgot the day I proved my point in the most dramatic way possible, by throwing up right in front of the teacher who wouldn't listen to me. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.